Okay, chapter 4 is in regards to the society and structure or social interaction. When we're talking about social interaction, we're talking about the pre-industrial societies, how we've kind of came from the beginnings to how we interact with our environment and how they use current technology versus old technology aspects. When we're talking about types of societies, we have come from a hunting and gathering type of tribes aspects. We come from a society that refers to a group of people who live in a definable community and share same culture, same aspects. We have some identities, we share, some thoughts and ideals that are very common. That is part of a society. Sociologist Linsky defines societies in a term for their technical philosophy, I guess you could kind of say, in regards to that aspects. Um, that the use of technology is eventually going to kind of catch up in regards to where we're at now. Societies with the technology depending on the fluctuations of their environment, while the industrialized socializations have more control over the impact of their surroundings, thus developing different culture features. So if you look at the way how we are in today's societies, and if you go to another country, other countries may not be as fully developed as we are. So that has a lot to do with in regards to our pre-industrial societies aspects. Um, when we're looking at from an agriculture aspects, these are societies that rely predominantly tools for survival and expands due to innovations such as like crops, rotations, fertilization. um, this was also part of the down of civilization because cities and towns were established and humans have more time for leisure activities. Because when we had this agriculture revolution, it made us drown our socialization more or less, because now a lot of the pastoral societies, a lot of the farming aspects were done more by mechanical tools versus more of human actually doing it. So you had the societies that had a chronological order that end up happening, which is like the hunters and gatherers. You had pastorals, you had the um, horticultural, and then you had agricultural. So that was the chronological order in regards to how we have industrialized in regards to where we're at. So when we're talking about hunter and gatherer societies, these demonstrate the strong dependence on the environment of the various types of pre-industrialized societies. So the hunters and gatherers rely on their surroundings for survival. They live off of the land, more or less, right? When we're looking at pastoral societies, these are the villagers. They rely on the um, dimensions of like animals as sources for survival, unlike earlier hunter and gatherers who depend entirely on the existence of resources to stay alive. Pastoral groups were um, they bred livestock. They were able to breed their livestock for either food, clothing, whatever aspects they needed, transportation even. This created a basically a surplus of goods that's allowed that trading to go back and forth to allow the individuals to continue with maintaining basically functional for livelihood. And then you have the horticultural, which is basically a form in the areas where rainfall and other conditions allow them to grow stable crops. So this is very similar to back to hunter and gatherers again, in the way that they largely depend on the environment for survival. They abandon their location, for the following resources to, settle predominantly within certain areas that produce a lot of rain. And then you have, last but not least, the agriculture, which rely permanently, predominantly actually, tools for survival. So around 300 BCE, the new technology is the one that kind of took this revolution in regards to making farming possible and making it profitable. Farmers learned how to rotate their crops. They learned to grow their fields. They reused waste products for fertilization. So they kind of found a way to make things kind of work better for them for societal purposes. And then the ninth century gave a rise to the feudal society, which is a strict hierarchy system of a power based around landowners and production. So this is kind of like the lords and that type of aspects, known as lords or queens or kings. Um, this is, they feel like they owned a piece of land in return for the resources of the land. They provided vessels, promised to fight for their lords. And it's kind of like, if you ever watched, I can't even think of it, Game of Thrones, it's that type of aspects, that era, that type of mindset. And then when we're looking into now, that was like the pre-industrial. When we're moving into the industrial, this is more in the 18th century. This is Industrial Revolution. Made this period like a remarkable number of new interventions that influence people daily. With this type of generation, we were able to broad a lot of information that kind of, pushed us a little bit more in regards to where we stand and what we do. So if you think about today, how does technology influence a society daily occupation? For those of you who are, in school and you're doing everything remote, if you think about technology, would you be able to continue school through the pandemic like we are if you didn't have the laptop, the Wi-Fi that we have, the phones, the tablets, whatever the case might be, in order for you to maintain? This is that industrial society. We've kind of end up going into a way to where our technology influences the way how we do our daily activities. We depend very heavily on our technology. We are kind of lost without our technology. It's one of those aspects to where we don't know what to do without it. In 1782, we had James White and Matthew Bolton. I'll replace that. Sorry. They're the ones that created the steam engine that could do the work of 12 horses by itself. So in the 18th century, this is where that big change kind of came into. Steam engines were developed more individually. Didn't have to depend on animals to do that labor aspect, so therefore more labor was able to be produced because now it was a machinery doing it versus an actual animal doing it. So it increased the productivity in regards to what we were trying to find or what we're trying to do. Excuse me. And then we ended up into like a pre-industrial society, where we look at information societies, sometimes known as a pre-industrial or use societies type aspects in regards to recent developments. Industrial societies are rooted in the production of the material goods. Information societies are based on the production of information and services that have been provided. So like digital technology, STEM engines are all part of information societies, but computers and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all that stuff, that's all part of that post-industrial, kind of continues. It still thrives, it still goes. So it's one of those aspects to where we're really still developing. This is kind of an example here that you're seeing on the screen. It's the villagers. So this is more or less of the aspects when it comes to that pastoral type. It's where societies meet the worst and the best type aspects. When cultures meet, technology can help, hinder, or even destroy. In the real world example that the book gave you was in regards to Exxon, the oil spillages and stuff like that. People are affected by those types of aspects when you're talking about industrialization and you're pushing those technology aspects. Rockefeller co-founded the standards of the oil companies came from a remarkable family of salesmen. Mineral laborers. By his death at age 98, he was worth about 1.4 billion. In industrial societies, business owners such as Rockefeller hold a major of power within our societies as well. So when we're looking at this bigger picture, we're looking at it from, okay, well, it's an industrialized, it's a business, it's something that has developed, it's something that has grown. And I mean, sure, you guys have heard the last name of Rockefeller. It still exists. It's considered old money. So therefore it's still, business that's kind of been in existence for a long time. When we're looking at a theoretical perspective in society, when we're looking at Buffett's ideal about taxation and spending habits of the very wealthy, or particularly since the rise of the question about Americans' embedded systems and class structures and social powers, their three major sociologist paragons differ from their perspectives on these pictures. So we'll start off with Durkheim as first. Durkheim, remember, is a functionalist. Like I mentioned, we'll start off with Durkheim. Durkheim is a functionalist. He views societies as an organism in which each proportion plays a vital role in keeping the organism steady and healthy. Um, Karl Max Weber, these are all different theoretical approach to kind of help us understand in regards to its function, in regards to how do we do everything. But like I said, functionalist Durkheim, he views society as an organism in which each portion plays a vital role in keeping the organism stable and healthy. How does that all happen? How does it all intertwine? He defined, Durkheim defined the collective of constants as the cumulative belief, morals, attitudes of science, right? When we're looking at this bigger picture, um, it's that social integration. How do we work? Where are our strengths when we tie people together? How do we have their social groups? What are the key factors of social life? It's all of that moral, the attitudes of the society, the beliefs. How do we all get along at certain times? Why do we only have certain aspects of people that we like to hang around with, and we only like to keep within our our small circles of society? I guess you could say that more of that, primary group aspects, that primary group, the ones that we feel very close, that we'd like to see face to face, that we have more of that intimacy type relationship to where we feel comfortable to tell anything with. So Durkheim in the pre-industrial societies explained that we were held together by a mechanical solidarity, which is a type of social order maintained by a collective consciousness of the culture, that things are done mostly because it's the way they've always been done that way. It's just how it works. Um, he also then turned around and said, okay, that was the pre-industrial. Now on the industrial side, he replaced it with the organic solitary, which is social order based around an acceptance of an economic and social difference. So this is the division of labor that becomes so specialized that everyone is doing a different thing. And when we're talking about division of labor, think of it as simple as one job that's divided in between three different people. So we'll take a fisherman, for example. You have a fisherman, he catches the fish, then you have one person that, cleans it, you have another person that drives it to the market, and then you have another person that sells it. That's a division of labor. You have, four different people doing this, a job of basically one person. But if that one person went to go do all those jobs, they would have to stop fishing at a certain time to be able to clean and drive to the market. So they would lose out on money because they're not maintaining fishing all the time. So that is that organic solitary when they looked at it. Excuse me. While the transition from mechanical to organic advantages for society, Durkheim noted that there can be a time of chaos or normlessness. It's also called an anonymity, which is like without loss. Um, so it's which the societies no longer has the support of a firm collective consciousness. And so it's kind of like we're kind of in limbo, more or less, in regards to when we're kind of dealing with certain things. So as an industrialization began to boom, Durkheim believed that people were more susceptible to anonymity because one, collective norms were weakened. Society no longer has the support of the collective consciousness, and specialization of labor led to alienation. So they didn't feel like they had when we were talking about alienation, individuals didn't feel like they had a connection to their job. So it was just basically they went through the motions without having any purpose of it at all. So that was the alienation. So what we're looking at now, Karl Marx, and the conflict, he looked at it as a social thinker in recent histories. He kind of said, okay, social constructions were predicted upon the ideal of based on superstructures. And when they're talking about superstructures, he's talking about the government, the family, the religion, the education, and the culture. So when he looked at it, and the base was just the economy, he asserted that all these elements of society structures depended on its economic structure. So if the economic side was doing very well, then so was the superstructure. If it was falling somewhere, then you had some issues. So Marx used the base economy that determined what a society will be like, more or less. So on an economic sense, he saw conflict existing between the owners of the means of production, capitalists. These are the ones that own the land, own the factories. They were also known as bourgeois. And then he also called the laborers called proletariats. These are your normal workers, the ones that were actually in the fields and working in the factories and stuff like that. He looked at it as an issue in between the two, because it was like, okay, well, no matter how we do this, there's going to be some type of a conflict. But when you're looking at four types of alienation, there are alienation of the product of one's labor, there's alienation from oneself, there's alienation from others. So when you're looking at this, how can the economy side of things really have an effect in regards to alienation? If you have an alienation of the product, okay, I can understand that, because that's just a job and you really have no connection with your job. But how does the alienation from oneself and the alienation of others have to do with part of the conflicts in regards to what happens in regards to the economy? It has to go back to more or less of the class conflict aspects. Marx and Engels, he was another sociologist, referred to capitalists, which is a way of organizing an economy so that the things that were used to make a transportation or the transport products such as land, oil, factories, ships, and etc., um, are owned by the individual people and companies rather than the government and the dictatorship of the capitalists. But the bourgeois kind of came into place. The other aspect that Karl Marx, he used a term called Communist Manifesto, which is based on the conflict theory perspective, which is one of those aspects to where it came part of his alienation of others. No sooner that he exploitation of the labor by the manufacturers it ended, he received his wage caches and stuff like that. It was just a proportion in regards to the landowners kind of keeping everybody at bay to keep sure and make sure everybody stays within their spots. As I mentioned, when it comes to alienation, this is the condition in which the individual is isolated and divorced from his or her society, work, or sense of self. You can end up also with a concept that's called false consciousness, which is a condition in which beliefs, ideals, and ideology of people are not in the person's own best interest. Ideology of the dominant class here in this case that we're talking about the bourgeois, the capitalist, that impose upon their proletariats. So depending on regards to this is dominant aspects, what is kind of considered in regards to what they're expecting is kind of what they're talking about in regards to that false consciousness. And then you have class consciousness, which is understanding exactly what class that you're underneath. So Karl Marx is on the left, Engels is on the right. They analyze the differences in the social power between have and have not groups. So the have is the bourgeois, the have nots are the proletariats. So this is assembly line install car parts with the aid of complex machinery. Has technology made this type of labor more or less the alienation? If you can kind of see, he's working by himself. There's no one there. So it's either you have to take pride in what you're doing and you understand what you're doing, because you're not working with anybody else. You're working with other machinery. Same thing with here. When you're working in cubicles, they use a max individual workspace in an office area. Such structures may be rational, but they are very isolating. For some people, they tend to try to be different. I've seen people decorate their cubicles with, doorbells, doormat says welcome, little box on the outside that says, it's like a mailbox for the incoming, pictures of family, whatever it's so that way they don't feel that alienation. It's so that way they could break that alienation feeling. So when we're trying to describe any actions that repeatedly, frequently becomes cast into a pattern, and that's that habitualization. When we're looking at that aspects, we're looking at something to break that pattern, right? That describes, like I said, any action that is repeated frequently becomes cast into a pattern, which then can be performed again in the future in the same manner and with the same economical effort. So if you kind of go back to this aspects here, it's the same pattern, it's the same routine, it's the same car regardless, unless if they switch a button and say, okay, we're done working on this car, now we're going to work on this truck. It's the same pattern still for that truck. It's not going to change. It's that habituation type aspects, right? When we're looking at institutionalization, this can be defined as the act of implementing a convention or norm into society. So, as a self fulfilling prophecy appears in many linear works, perhaps most famously in the story of here, you can kind of see it's, you know, father marry his mother kind of aspects. It's kind of like taking those stories and developing them on from there. But when we're looking at the excuse me, sorry. When we're looking at industrialization, it could be defined as, like I said, the act of implementing a convention or norms into society. It's how we work it. It's how we do it. It's how we develop in regards to um, that real type aspects. There's the words I'm looking for. Thomas theorem. He defined a situation that is real and consequences in regards to the theorem experiment in regards to the way how our population grows versus the way how our agriculture grows. Then they looked at the one way or the other. They looked at the agriculture grows arithmetically where population grows geometrically. So food wise, grows 1, 2, 3, and 4. Population wise grows from 2 to 4 to 6. It multiplies at a different rate. So it could go from 4 to 8. It could go from 8 to 24. It could jump at a bigger, faster rate than the production of our actual means of our food. So when we're looking at self-fulfilling prophecy, Merton kind of came up with the terms. He explains it with a self-fulfilling prophecy. Even a false ideal can become true if it's acted upon. So it's the way how codes of social norms are created, that successful definition of a situation. It's how do we play certain roles? Can we plan them out? Can we determine in regards to making something happen a certain way at a certain time, developing it at a certain level or a certain speed. So it's one of those aspects in regards to fully understanding in regards to that, how that self-fulfilling prophecy can be really filled out. And then when we're looking at roles and statuses, roles are patterns of behavior that we recognize in each other, of a person, a social status. So as a son or daughter, you have a role to play. As an employee, you have a role to play. Mother, fathers, they have a role to play. Neighbors, same thing. Teachers, same thing. There's various roles that each assists with different aspects and different terms. And when we're looking at it, there's each role also has a status, which is described by the responsibilities and benefits or that a person experience according to their rank or that role in society. So ascribed status is something that's not selected, such as a son, elderly person, or a female. It's something that's it's inherited. It's something that have really no control over. When you're looking at an achieve status, this is obtained by choice. So such as a high school dropout, self-made millionaire, or a nurse. These are the pathways that you're choosing to go. You're choosing that set. You're choosing that role to do. It's not anything that's any different than what's sitting there. When you're looking at role sets, these are array of roles attached to it. So it really depends in regards to what role you're playing at the time, which then in returns could give you role strengths. So considering that you are a parent, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're driving, problem solving, acting as a source of immoral guidance, the list goes on, right? That is considered um, some role strengths, because you might have to be determining like, okay, which one is a priority? Which one do you need to do right now? How do you handle it at this point in time? Okay, priority is drive this person here, go pick this person up here, go home, cook dinner, then clean. So we tend to deal as with role strengths throughout our life in regards to trying to prioritize ourselves all the time. When we're looking at role conflict, when you have one or more roles that are contradictory to one another, this is a huge thing where role conflicts tend to occur as well. So um, when people, the best example I could give you is like having a new mom returning to work after giving birth to her daughter, finding it difficult to act as a mother, a wife, and an executive. So she's having this role conflict because she doesn't know which one she really wants to do at the point in time. She knows she has a job to do because she's an executive. She knows she has a duty as a wife, and she knows she has a duty as a mom. But at the same time, she's having some role conflicts because they're contradicting one another. Excuse me. Charles Cooley had a concept of the looking glass, self-hypothesized that people base their image on how they think others will see them. So we have a tendency to kind of create this image within ourselves of basically role performing and our perceptions in regards to how do we see ourselves, how does others sees us. So as Cooley, like I said, he based our image on what we think of. We image how we must appear to others, then react to the speculation. So if, excuse me, certain clothing, preparing your hair, wearing makeup, having certain catalog clothing, these are all bases of that looking glass self. Like I said, it's people base their images on how they think others see them. So I know in high school it's very how do you view yourself type aspects, and you're looking at yourself and you're looking at that glass self and you're determining, okay, well, I don't have the popular clothes, or I don't have that name brand purse, or I don't have the you know top of the brand iPhone, or whatever it might be. That's how you base you think people are basing your image off of the things that you actually materialize by versus basing it off of your own personality type aspects. If you guys have any questions in regards to this chapter, please feel free to email me and give me a call or a text. I'm here to assist. Have a good one. My throat is on fire.
Yeah, it was for different functions.